Welcome to our open house, and we are happy for the turnout. We thank everyone for showing up, and I want to thank our panelists for participating. I want to thank our staff, namely Lucy, David Hawkins, he waved his hand, Ray Macko upstairs, Tommy Hart, Jillian. So I want to thank everyone that helped put this together. The reason for this is, well, some of you may not know, but I am the training director of Local 94's Training Center. And I also serve on Local Law 97 Advisory Board. And I happen to be on the Communications Committee. And on that committee, we are communicating the law to the city. So I couldn't think of a better way in this position, in this space that we have, to open this house up and use this venue to help clarify what Local Law 97 is all about. And this is why we're here. The training center started down the block. And I remember, some of you may remember, down the block, in the basement. And we evolved to where we are today. And that consists of being accredited by the EPA to provide technician certification, being accredited by the DEC, providing water treatment certification, to be accredited by the FDNY to provide fire life safety and refrigeration license. And so I can't forget also that this program this program gives a student that wants to go to CUNY, 19 credits are provided from this program to our CUNY program. I don't know if we have any representatives here from CUNY. I don't see anybody. All right. So anyway, this program, we're able to bargain for 19 college credits. So a person that graduates our program, they're able to go to New York City Technical College and receive 19 college credits. You know, the feedback that I was expecting was from the audience. It wasn't. Anyway, what I want to do is I want to introduce a couple of people. To kick everything off, I want to first introduce Mr. Cooper Brown, and he's going to come for remarks. Cooper Brown is our business manager, and also he is co-chair of our trustees. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Unions working together with labor, and labor working together with management. It's a beautiful thing. We work together to accomplish a lot. We have accomplished a lot over the years, and we will continue. I'm going to step back and let Howard run his show because it was a very worthwhile show. We got a lot of good people here, a lot of new initiatives are going forward, and enjoy it. Have a great day.
Next, we're going to ask Mr. Howard Rothschild. He is the president of the RAB, Realty Advisory Board. Also, he co-chairs as a trustee for our training.
Good morning, and thank you everyone for coming. And Howard, thanks for coming. I know there's a lot of union folks in the room. There's a ton of management folks in the room. And it really is a testament to the partnership between the REB and labor and the industry and the union. I've known Kuba for over 30 years and Ray for well over 10 years. And I think a lot of people think that, you know, they're on one side and we're on the other and we don't get along, and nothing could be further from the truth. It's really together that we work in partnership, really for the benefit of the membership and the industry. This training fund is really a testament to all of that. We have people coming in from all over in terms of into the industry. Most of them don't know what they're doing at first, but they go through a mandatory 3-year training, and over that 3 years, they learn about all the building systems, as well as a lot of vocational skills that they're going to need in the building in terms of plumbing, electrical, and obviously HVAC. And sort of at the end of that pipe comes a well-trained worker, someone who can get a lot more than a living wage, really to get the American dream. They get a great wage and great benefits, medical and training and retirement, etc. And that I think leads to a happy, well-motivated workforce, one that you can retain from crib to retirement. And it's not just that generation. What we often see is that the job is so good and people are treated fairly that it's not just that worker, it's the next generation and the next generation. And I know that's like that for a lot of people in this room. So it's really an honor for me to be here today. I think this is the 36th year of the training fund. I think we did the same ceremony about 5 years ago, and I think we probably got a little bit off kilter because of this little thing called COVID and the pandemic. But Howard, thank you so much for this, and your staff and union folks, thank you, and the folks from the industry, thank you all for your support. So, thank you.
Sports world that, oh, I do like this better, yeah. There's a saying in the sports world that says, you know, game recognizes game. I don't know if you guys know that term, game recognizes game. So we are going to introduce our moderator, but before we do that, because of game recognizing game, first I want to introduce to you Bill Farrell. He does our newsletter. In his prior life, he wrote for the Daily News. So you'll understand why I said game recognizes game. Bill Farrell.
Thank you, Howard. I really don't know why Howard couldn't have done this, but thank you so much. Thanks everybody for coming. But in game recognizing game, in the planning of this program, Howard determined the best way to give maximum information in a reasonable amount of time was to have a panel discussion with experts who are dealing with Local 97 every day. So you can have all the experts in the world, but if you don't have anybody to ask the right questions, we get nowhere. So that's why we turned to Greg David. Now, many of you may, you know, Greg is the director of Finance and Business School at the Newmark School of Journalism. He's a contributor to the City magazine, but I'm sure most of you already know him for his 35 years as a columnist and editor at Crane's New York Business. Ladies and gentlemen, Greg David.
So I think we're going to do this with one mic. Thank you all. Our topic is Local Law 97, passed by the City Council, signed by Mayor Bill de Blasio, and now in the hands of Eric Adams. But more broadly, I think this panel's about the role of dense urban centers like New York City in fighting climate change, who pays, and how much. Our panel is composed of 2 key members of the Adams team involved in the law and 2 real estate executives who must deal with it. And at the end, questions from you all to the panel. I want to introduce our panel. What I'm going to do is give their names and titles and then ask them to give us a couple sentences of background. And we'll start with Sam Mann, who is Senior Policy Advisor in the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice.
Thanks so much, Greg. And yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. You know, a little bit about myself. I'm a born and raised New Yorker. Went to public high school and currently serve as a Senior Policy Advisor at the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. So yeah, this kind of partnership, I think, is what we need in order to move forward. I'll talk more about that during the actual panel discussion, but just wanted to quickly introduce myself and yeah, just say that truly grateful for participating in this discussion today. Thank you.
Carl Ian Graham is Deputy Director of Building Admissions at the Department of Buildings.
Good morning. Thank you all for having me here to talk a little bit about Local Law 97, which is my day-to-day. I've been in the Department of Buildings for about 2 years now. Prior to that, I'm a PE, and I spent 30 years doing energy analysis, commissioning, green building consulting, and I've seen a lot of changes in the building industry. And done a lot on a computer, done a lot on paper, and done a lot in machine rooms, just like you guys are looking at on a daily basis. So I look forward to a robust conversation about how we can make buildings help the city reach its goals.
James Hollywood is Chief Engineer for SL Green.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm James Hollywood, Chief Engineer at SL Green 1 Vanderbilt. It's the largest building in Midtown. Quite sure a lot of you are aware of it. We're right next door to Grand Central. I'm the product of this training center. When we opened this room, I think I was one of the first classes to come in here. My first teacher is sitting in the back of the room. I think he remembers. He's now a business agent. I went through the whole program. I was lucky enough. I went to BOCES on Long Island. I learned refrigeration, and then I came here. I had a great friend in Jimmy Coffey, and I had the opportunity to join a great organization, Local 94. I'm a legacy. My son Brendan is in his 3rd year at Local 94. He's an engineer, and we're a proud family. We attend the family picnic. We try to volunteer when we can. And Local 94 has given me the strength to go on and get an RPA from BOMA, as well as an FMA. The training center had a lot to do with that. The joining together with BOMA and management always made me feel good. You know, management is always looking for those people they can bridge the gap, and I feel like that's what we're doing here today, especially as we talk about these laws that impact us all. I just want to introduce myself and say thank you.
And Gene Boninger is Senior Vice President for Operations at the Rubin Company.
Hi. Thanks, Howard, for asking me to attend. Name is Gene Bonneberger. I'm head of real estate operations for the Rudin organization. I started out 45 years ago as a Local 94 helper, very proud to say that. I am at a disadvantage to James because we didn't have the training program back then. So we had to learn, you know, all on the job. So this training program, since it started, I think it was 1986? Yeah, has probably been the best thing that's happened to our industry. And you know, the 94 operators that we have operating our buildings are the best in the country. And the buildings really wouldn't be where they were if it wasn't for them. So thanks again for having me.
So my first question goes to Sam Mann. Can you give us an overview of the Adams administration's view on the city's role in combating climate change?
Sure, thank you. I welcome that question. And Yeah, this administration is committed to leading a just and equitable transition to a carbon neutral city, and that requires partnerships with the operators on the ground, like the gentleman in the room, and everyone as part of Local 94. Infrastructure is a big focus of this administration. And what do I mean by infrastructure? I mean waterfronts, parks, waste management. In terms of waterfront protection, fortifying them against future storms, and not just hardening them, but making them more resilient, making them more responsive, be able to absorb some of the impact from flooding and storm surges. So all that to say is really improving the everyday services for all New Yorkers is what this administration is focused on. And that includes traffic safety, construction safety, safety from natural disasters, more public spaces, taking control of the trash, and last but not least, future-proofing our city. So that entails, decreasing our dependence on oil and gas to serve our buildings, increasing wind and solar, geothermal energy, really deploying that so that New York City can really reap the benefits of having carbon-free electricity flowing into our city. And what else? Making sure that schools are energy efficient and low carbon, both in the way they're built and the way they are operated. In addition to the physical assets, these schools need to have curriculum so that the younger generation, people who are going to be in the workforce in the very near future, can be trained, can be introduced to green technologies, can get a head start so that they can be part of this movement, this part of this this fight against climate change. So hardening infrastructure, greening buildings, that's incredibly important through laws like the Local 97. That's first in the world kind of building performance standard, and that's going to improve the air quality. New York City's got much better air quality now than we have had in a very long time. So we want to keep moving that direction. We want to increase, prevalence of good-paying green jobs. We want to reduce traffic, and last but not least, make the city more resilient. In terms of stormwater, storms, flooding, surges, making sure that we're hardened and we're ready and we're prepared to address climate change. Because this is an incredibly important port city, and we have to make sure that we fortify it so that we are protected against, future storms, and just making sure that we are climate resilient.
So I can really throw out my next question, because Ian Graham said Local 197 is his day-to-day. So tell us where we are on the implementation of Local 197, and what is your day-to-day about then?
Day-to-day. Well, the law tells us that we have to get to 40% reduction by 2030 and 80% by 2050. The law tells us there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle. Anybody who's read it knows there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that have yet to be sort of sorted out and figured out. So our day-to-day for the past couple of years, and a couple of our advisory board members and working group members are here to talk about how those pieces fit together and how they're going to work in concert to achieve those goals, right? Ultimately, the goal is to get carbon emissions down, right? That doesn't work. We don't meet our goals by collecting penalties, right? We need people in buildings changing the way that they operate and they work to bring those emissions down. I think most of us have seen the daily effects or seasonal effects of climate change. It's kind of hard to miss it these days, and it's only going to get worse over time, right? We're all in this together, and we talked about safety and resiliency. There's nothing more important than protecting the climate in which we live, right? So we can live a safe and productive lives, and we leave ourselves, our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren a planet they can live on. And to that end, right, so the goal is to forge the pieces of the law to make it work, not just to set limits, but to figure out how those limits actually move buildings toward the goal, the other goals, the supplemental goals that need to happen to get these emissions down. Energy efficiency is a major component of what needs to happen. Encouraging elements of it to help encourage folks to put that energy efficiency up front, start as soon as physically possible to enabling those laws, enabling those pieces to fit, transitioning for that future where we do have a lot more renewable on the electric grid, being ready to make those buildings switch. Those that can and are able to make that transition to an all-electric building, you know, getting an industry ready to take the numerous properties that are affected by the law, right? More than half the buildings in square footage are probably affected by the law, right? As a consequence, ramping up the trades, the manufacturing and so forth to get that equipment out there and into the hands of building owners and to have the time and effort to make that happen is going to be important. You know, leaders in the industry like, you know, the Rudens and the SL Greens and the others that are out there that are forging forward and have been doing it for a long time, mind you, to continue to have them lead that market and to move it forward. These are the pieces that we think about on a daily basis to try to make this law not just about collecting penalties and setting limits, but really about transforming the marketplace through the law and the signals that the law has now, 2024, 29, 30, 35, and beyond, all the way up to 2050. So that's kind of what we've been working with the help of 150 to 200 volunteers who've been getting together on a very regular basis all through COVID on a whole bunch of Zoom calls. It's awesome to see faces that I've seen for years on a little tiny screen now face to face, now that, you know, we can actually get together live and in person again. But again, you know, it's thanks to industry representatives from across the city, stakeholders that really understand the nature of it and bring a varied series of perspectives to what we do and how we do it, so that we can make this law really meaningful and effective and implementable. Anyway, that's my day today.
Sam, one of the key strategies of this administration is the accelerator program, and I thought it would be appropriate for you to sort of outline what it is.
Thank you. Yeah, so the New York City Accelerator, I think most of the people in this room are familiar with the previous iteration of the program, the Retrofit Accelerator, and that program is there to serve building stakeholders, to provide that free technical assistance to help them discover like what it means to implement a deep energy retrofit project or a series of projects sequenced over time that makes sense for that building, depending on what's in there. So it is, you know, we know that there isn't a one-size-fits-all strategy or solution to compliance with any local laws, but that's what the program is there for, to help with compliance with local laws, to understanding what it takes to get into a low-carbon outcome, you know, deep energy retrofits, you know, getting towards passive house-like standards. And, you know, what does that entail? It's that free advice. It's also training. Training is a big part of the program. There's an internship program as well as a service provider program. So, you know, we understand is building up the workforce, making sure there's, you know, college and graduate school students are exposed to this industry and have some experience so that they can join the workforce in the very near future. There's recognition involved, recognition for all the leaders that are doing the right thing through the New York City Accelerator, through the Carbon Challenge program, and we've been partnering on that program for a number of years now, and it's great to sit next to a couple of the leaders in that program as well. So yeah, providing that free technical assistance, that advice, so that they understand they can orient themselves, talking about building stakeholders, orient themselves to the different local laws. With 97 specifically, like, does it apply to me? If so, how do I comply, and by when do I have to do it? The program will help you discover that, you know, using your energy auditing data, you know, walking through all those recommendations, and then implement them in a timeline that makes sense for that particular building. I think all those things combined is free service to all building owners, large commercial tenants. You know, previously it was hyper-focused on the multifamily sector, but in this iteration of the program, we really expanded our services to serve not only multifamily, but institutional and commercial buildings as well. And you know, there is a new construction component to it. So it's not just retrofitting, it's all about designing buildings of the future.
So when I talked to Ian on the phone, he said he was the cop on the beat. So when I asked him about your role as the cop on the beat, and you know, I've seen statistics that 20% of the buildings in New York are gonna have to pay fines next year. And one, Bryant Park, says it's gonna have to pay $2 million a year. So what does being the cop on the beat mean? And you said it's not about collecting fines, but there are a lot of fines gonna be collected.
So penalties are in the law. If there are no teeth, there is no compliance, right? So the DOB's job, again, you know, the law posts the speed limit and the DOB is there to make sure that people are adhering to it. But really, at the end of the day, again, the goal is to partner with the mayor's office, partner with building owners, partner with the folks in the city to ensure that the law can be adhered to, the law can be met. And you're right, it was by design, you know, there are 80% of buildings or properties are expected to be compliant in the 24 to 29 timeframe, right? So most of the folks are looking at it 2030. There are folks that are gonna hit that 20. Some of it is, people have complained that the system is published in the law, it's a little challenging. There are elements within the law that talk about Energy Star portfolio manager mapping. We've heard that, department's working on things to hopefully make it more attuned to the way buildings actually use energy, okay? And recognize the differences that exist out there. Stay tuned, the law's not done. We are working on it, we're looking at it, we're trying to figure out how it works. But yeah, but somebody has to be there to collect and make sure that folks do it. You know, working in the energy code industry for a long time, it felt like until the city actually started enforcing the energy code on the new building side, I was like the only guy in the room that knew there was an energy code and telling designers and owners, by the way, there's an energy code, have you ever heard of it? You know, until you enforce it, there people don't really spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Now we're gonna get to the people who actually have to deal with this. So, James runs the most modern office building in New York, the newest, biggest, whatever. And tell us about One Vanderbilt's energy use, and tell us about how the law affects you.
Thank you. When One Vanderbilt started out in its design, it wasn't last year, okay? So we're talking maybe 6, 7 years ago, we started to draw the project. Immediately we knew there's not gonna be any steam there, right? We're gonna be looking at a gas-only building. We're gonna be creating our own heat. We're gonna be buying gas, and we're gonna be installing boilers. We have 10, 6 million BTU boilers. I bring natural gas in, I make my own secondary heat. Also, part of our design is a super tall building. My minimum slab to slab is 16.5, so that's my short floor, okay? And I go as high as 22 feet on some of the tenant build-out floors where we're getting 20-foot pieces of glass. We harvest, we like to say 80% of our light from outside. We balance our light. Every light in the building is an LED. Anything that spins has a VFD on it. I've spent the last 33 years installing VFDs, and I walk into a building and I have thousands. As far as the local law 97, we had our best intentions by installing a boiler plant. We also went cogen. For those of you who that's a new idea to, we have gas turbines, which work like a jet engine. We feed them with gas. Each one can produce 2,000 kW, of which I have 6, which comes out to 1.2 megs of power. Unfortunately, I'm gonna take a hit for the gas. There's no, and I may be mistaken, but as I know of right now, there's no adjustment in the law for me co-generating, right? If I just purely run a generator, and make power, there is a fine for that. Supposedly, I am going to get a reduced fine or some kind of leniency because I will be co-generating. What that means is in the summertime, the cogen plant produces 200-degree water. I can use that to make cooling, oddly enough, out of an absorption chiller. It's magic. Okay, we put hot water in, we get cold water out. Come to the training center one night, we'll explain to you roughly how it works. But for right now, let's just say it's magic. When we're not in cooling, we take that hot water and we put it into our secondary hot water system for radiant heat, and we're also using it for domestic hot water. I have a restaurant that operates 7 days a week. It's a great place to put it. When you're doing cogen, the name of the game is hide the hot water. Okay, we have to do something else with it. Otherwise, you're just generating and you will be fine. So we'll wait and see how that goes. As far as our portfolio goes, we feel like we're in great shape for 2024. As you know, we've been benchmarking, right? Been benchmarking for years. We know where the equipment is. We know where all the dogs are. We know where we need VFDs. We know what systems draw a lot of power. And we're going to be fine, absolutely first round. The new building's going to be great first round. We do have some concerns. What about your high energy users, right? Your data centers and things. We don't see anything in the law as far as that goes. Also, we don't see anything in the law about operating hours. We're a little concerned about that. I also want to get credit because I'm co-generating, right? I don't want to be penalized as if I'm burning number 6 fuel oil like I was 30 years ago. You know, we've gone through, I've been changing boilers and VFDs and chillers and this whole time. Walking into One Vanderbilt was a breath of fresh air. It was all these thoughts came before us. We're 1.7 million square feet. Some of the guys in the room might want to know I have 6 Con Ed transformers. I sit above the shuttle. I sit above Grand Central. I sit above everything that I can't put a transformer vault in my sidewalk. I take 13,600 volts from Con Ed direct to my 17th floor. We craned 6 Con Ed transformers up to my 17th floor, and we have them sitting air-cooled on the north side of the building, and that's where my switchgear room is. Efficiency is great because now we have all our power almost to the middle of the building. We're feeding up and down. We're safe from any water, although where we are in Midtown isn't an issue. We see a lot of buildings moving the MERs up. That was great. Also, we built with a central plant. I have 5 chillers by Train, Centrivacs. We went back old school with that. We feel like there's some efficiency there. We work very closely with Train, JB&B. The design on the super talls are all kind of similar in certain ways. I feel like we've gone to different ways with power. We're going gas generation. It's a great system. Those who want to know, it's the capstone system. I was out in California. I did the factory witness test. They're bulletproof from what I see. You rebuild them after a certain number of hours, but we've been running. So when you look up and you see the Rangers colors on the top of my building, that's brought to you by Local94. Okay, we're producing power. I'm producing about a meg. I want to say today I'm probably running 2 megs, 2 1/4, but half of that power is brought to be by me and my guys. And we're very proud of that. And I think getting the training of the men where we can operate these systems, you know, it's a whole different bunch of guys. Where we're running top shelf, we're monitoring these systems constantly. If we lose anything in that chain, we're not making our own electric. If we lose the absorption chiller, we start to overheat that plant, it shuts right down. We've been running it going on 6 months. We have great results. We're really saving power. These units use some of that power for their own selves. There's a compressor in there. There's some other equipment that burns about 2,000 kW. So my net is about 1 meg, which is substantial. We have to see how that's going to impact us as far as the other programs that we're involved in. We participate in the NYSERDA. We also participate in the Con Edison and the emergency. We're trying to balance that into our whole operation, and we think we have a way. That's pretty much the power system at One Vanderbilt. Thank you.
Thanks. So our portfolio ranges from, on the commercial side anyway, from buildings that were built in the mid-50s up until the late 2000s. Our challenges with the law, James mentioned tenants, and when tenants move in, that changes the whole picture, right? So when we look at how our buildings scale against Local Law 97, oddly enough, or at least when we first looked at it, it was oddly enough, the newest, most efficient buildings perform the worst in terms of Local Law 97. In terms of fines, in terms of Energy Star scores, it was a challenge. Our oldest buildings are the best scoring buildings. So we have buildings in the mid-50s vintage that are scoring, in the high 80s Energy Star, but when you walk around the inside of those buildings, it's a typical office. Guy or a lady in an office, got a computer, shares a printer with a couple of people. You walk into a building like 3 Times Square, traders with 4 monitors on their desks, place is packed, it's operating 24/7. So out of our entire portfolio, we probably have 3 buildings that would face some level of fine in 2025. One of them is 345 Park, is our flagship building. It's our biggest building. It's about 1.8 million square feet. Our major tenants there are the NFL, KPMG, Blackstone, right? So, why is that building over the limit? We operate probably around 2,000 hours of overtime AC a year. So, one solution to get that building back under limits was to tell Blackstone, no more overseas trading. You can't work late at night. KPMG, tax season, no more overtime. You're leaving at 5. And NFL, no more watching football on Sundays, right? Because they operate, that's where the referees are that call the plays on the game. Obviously, we can't do that, so we have to look at a longer-term strategy for that building. Our oldest building, the first building that we ever built in the mid-50s, scores 88 Energy Star score. It's safe in 2025, it's safe in 2030. We're gonna tear that one down. So that one right now is netted and it's about to start demolition. We just issued design documents. That's gonna be all electric building. So no steam, no gas, it's gonna be all air source heat pumps. But you can do that with a new building. You can't do that with an older building. We have a bunch of buildings in the middle, in between those 2 ends of the spectrum, where there's a lot of good work that can be done, but they're not immediately threatened by Local Law 97. And this was a conversation Ian and I had before the meeting started. The worst building that we have is a building at 32 6th Avenue. It is a data center building, okay? It's a 1 million square foot building. It's fully electrified. We do use steam to heat the building, but the steam represents about 3% of the total GHG output of the building. The tenant electrical load, right? The core, the base building core represents about 6% of the total energy use. The rest is all tenant. That building, starting in 2025, is gonna pay almost $3 million a year in fines, okay? So in between 2025 and 2030, that building will spend $14 million in fines for Local Law 97. Ironically, there's really nothing we can do. I mean, everything is state-of-the-art, but, high energy intensive users. Not doing anything, as the grid gets greener, the fine's gonna diminish. But Ian promised me that we're gonna fix something about that, and he's gonna allow me to spend that $14 million and invest it in the other properties and keep lowering the emissions footprint on a portfolio basis.
Well, I guess we better hear about that premise. Actually, in testimony before the city council, the senior member of the administration said some tweaks in the law were under consideration. And one of the recurring themes here is the most modern office buildings are the ones that are paying the highest fines, which doesn't seem right anyway. So Ian and Sam, take it away.
Nothing like being put on the spot. Listen, the issues you're bringing up are not, it's not the first time I've heard this. The laws are right now, the limits that are published in the law are based on building code, right? And the law also includes a provision about mapping to Energy Star portfolio manager property types. We've heard this, we recognize that there's a challenge, and we're working on a solution. So I don't know that we're gonna get rid of all the fine in every building. I know that that's not gonna happen, because again, it's by design, right? The idea is to move in a different direction. And we can look at 24, we can look at 25, we can look at 29, but really, we're looking at 80% reduction by 2050. We're all gonna have to rethink the way buildings are heated and cooled and, you know, the fuels that we're using and how it's happening, right? I mean, 'cause to get to 80%, we're just getting started, right? There's a trajectory between, you know, here to there, right? And we'll all have to think about it. And the key is timing, right? And understanding and being sensitive to the fact that, that's out there. But that's why we talked to the New York City Accelerator, right? There's help out there. NYSERDA is in the room back there somewhere. And they've been working on trying to get buildings to use less energy forever. There's money available, there's technical advice available, it's tapping into it, it's making, getting the resources put there and understanding investments are gonna be required, and not every investment necessarily may have payback, right? Again, 80% is a big number, right? I guess the question I would challenge people to say is, what's the alternative? Right? If we don't do this, what happens to the place we live in, right? And it's not just New York City, right? We're the first ones, right, to start thinking about these hard questions and really tackle the problems, because, you know, we're New York City, that's what we do, we're first. But the rest of the world's talking about it. Boston's got laws, DC's got laws, everybody around us is having to rethink the way we have been doing things for a really, really long time. So it's a big challenge, we're working on it.
Is there a timeline? I assume changes to the law will have to go to the city council, right? So is there, or no?
It depends on what changes you're talking about. This thing about Energy Star Portfolio Manager mapping, it's in the law, right? This is a rulemaking process. That doesn't have to go to city council, right? We have the authority to make those changes right now. So certain things can be done because the law gives us the flexibility to do it, right? And certain things can't be done because the law doesn't give us the flexibility, would require legislative changes. The portfolio manager remapping process or trying to come up with equivalency is something that we're working on right now and should be coming out sooner than later, right? The law also talks about a lot of other pieces of the puzzle. January 1st, 2023 is a timeline for a lot of the different pieces of the puzzle that have to be published. So we're working towards that. We're working with the advisory board and the working groups. We're on that timeline.
So when I was preparing for this, one of the interesting things I saw, that one of the criticisms of the law is that the fines just go into the general fund. That the fines aren't reused to energy efficiency, and especially because we have all these exemptions in the law, you know, every rent-regulated building is exempt from the standards of the law. I work in a building owned by CUNY's Research Foundation. I bet it's exempted and it has a big F every day when I come in. So I guess for Sam, I wanted to ask a question about policy. Is that good policy, and is this administration considering doing anything about it?
So buildings with rent-regulated units still have to comply, they're not exempt. They have a different timeline, or they have a different set of measures they have to implement. Still very impactful, very meaningful measures. For the most part, low cost, and can often be done in-house. And so I think that's better than nothing. That's a good baseline for all buildings. I think that's just a smart way to, it just makes business sense. So, you know, rent regulated, and the cities, I know often people say that the city is exempt, city buildings are exempt. That's not true. The city actually has an even more aggressive goal. Ian mentioned it before, 40% by 2025, and a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, carbon neutral by 2050. So very ambitious goals on the city side as well. And I do think it is smart policy because, you know, as we said before, the point of the law is not to collect fines, regardless of where it goes, whatever fund. We don't want to rely on those funds. We want to reduce carbon. So if we set it up in a way where that the fines goes towards something projects that are things that we all want, then I think that's a conflict there. We want reduction in GHG. We don't want the funds going to any kind of fund. That's the ultimate goal of this, is to reduce emissions and to create jobs and to make the city safer for all.
So we heard the problems you all face. Give me a list of 3 things you would like them to do.
I think the big push for us is going to be from the supply side, right? The city can push the projects for the wind. There's a big wind project in the works. We also have some other renewable energy sources, which will give us a place to actually go and buy power, which will reduce our carbon footprint, number one. Also, the guidelines that we're tied in, to take into account our operations, our density, our, when we're running buildings that are operating as critical systems, that's important for us. That's who our big tenants are. Those are the hedge funds, those are the people we're going after, right? It's Wall Street, it's New York. This is really dense power. I think we need to make some kind of change. I was on very early with the Energy Star. I was dialing down to Washington, D.C., and I started to benchmark my building way back. It was a heat pump building, and I worked with the EPA, with the Energy Star people from DC when the program first started out, and that's gotten better and better. Those guidelines take into account a lot of the concerns that the owners have. And I think that's gonna be our number one point, and we need a good place to buy clean energy. We need, if there's enough hydropower out there, we won't be buying dirty energy. We'll buy it, you make it. As long as there's enough for all of us, that's gonna help drop all of our carbon footprint. Thank you.
It's probably too late for some of this, but early on, one of the things that I know I brought up numerous times in terms of penalties was that, this is really, we look at it as an energy tax. And if we call it an energy tax, it allows us to pass that expense along to tenants in the commercial buildings, which is only gonna incentivize them to become more energy efficient. Right now, at a minimum, in the commercial buildings, they're using 50% of the electrical energy, but they have no ownership of the penalty, they have no incentive to change other than their own ESG goals, and that's something that really needs to be addressed. Until you get them engaged and in that game, not a lot is gonna change. There's not a lot that we can control when it comes to that. The other thing, I know that the carbon trading was put aside for now, but I think we really should be looking at compliance by portfolio, because we all have some of those outliers in our portfolio that there's not a lot you can do about. And then you have this other whole group of buildings that, they're not at risk for paying fines in 2025 or even 2030, but they have a lot of good projects that can be done. And if the goal is to ultimately lower the total GHG footprint, those buildings shouldn't be ignored. We're doing a proposal with the Empire Building Challenge, and we selected our buildings to go into that challenge for that reason. The buildings that would otherwise be neglected, at least in the near term, but still have some good projects that are not difficult projects to do and yield great savings on GHG, as opposed to trying to, chase the good buildings, chase the efficient buildings with, finding projects that aren't easy to do, or maybe there isn't a project that you can do. You're just kind of spinning your wheels. Go after the ones where there's good savings to be had.
Ian brought something up that was on my agenda, because as I was reading at one point when the law was passed, one of the supporters of the law said it was a figure it was gonna cost $4 billion to implement, which I think from what else I read is pretty low. And the person said, oh, it'll be okay, they'll make it back over 20 years by lowering their rates.
That they don't even know what you're talking about. How do you get them into the system?
Thank you. That's a fantastic question, because that's one of the primary goals of the New Cities Accelerator program, is not just providing technical assistance to those who have to comply with local laws, who have really ambitious CSG goals, but it's also about bringing awareness about what New York City is trying to do and why it's important for the buildings to take part of this movement. So raising awareness, especially for the Class B and C buildings, because you're right, they might not have a super sophisticated, well-built-out team to dive into these things every day. So having that assistance from the Accelerator program is really crucial, especially for this subset of buildings. But just because they might, I know you were saying, Class B and C, but their energy rates might be even lower. But that is a sign that there's a lot of upside, and I think there's a lot of potential. So, realizing that potential is something that the Accelerator program can help do.
A question, first one's a stupid question. All electric building, is that, we're powering everything off the grid? All right. And then, the second question is, as far as measuring the air quality in New York City, how much of it do you, point towards the buildings, and how much do you point towards the traffic, and how do you make the determination between, One Bryant Park and the Cross Bronx Expressway on a Friday night?
Another great question, thank you for that. And the reason that there's so much focus on buildings is because they represent the lion's share of New York City's GHG emission profile. Roughly 2/3 of the entire city's profile, GHG emission profile, comes from buildings, providing power and operations of these buildings. Traffic makes up about 30%, and then the rest, around 40%, from waste. So looking at the scale, what buildings represent, we know that yes, they represent 2/3 of citywide emissions, but that's also a great opportunity to address, because if we are to have any chance of reaching our city's goals, 80 by 50 carbon neutrality, we have to address the biggest emitters, and that's our buildings.
So all the buildings went electric, tomorrow, we can see the drop.
If we were to transition off of fossil fuels by tomorrow, the city would improve its air quality dramatically. But there's a simultaneous bringing in, we have these nice little kits, thank you very much, Local94, these wind turbines. And I think that represents what we're trying to do on the city and the state level, is to bring in clean electrons to the city, so that has to happen at the same time. Bring in carbon-free electrons while electrifying heating and hot water.
Gene and I were discussing before this issue of the all-electric grid. A couple years ago, I was moderating a panel prompted by the person who used to have his job, or used to be his boss, which was basically from people involved in gas who wanted to make the case that we needed to slow down the move to all-electric so that gas remained a crucial part of the energy mix. So what are the prospects for an all-electric grid and implementing it?
Well, again, it's a lot easier when you're building a new building, right? But then, not only the supply side, but transmission and distribution in the city, it's not there. And, to get there, it's some major construction that the utility has to do to get the power to all areas of the city. Right now, some of my industry counterparts were working and challenging Con Ed with issues that we're having right now with power quality. It's happening more and more frequently, where we get these dips in the middle of the day and elevator equipment is damaged, and some of the newer technologies, heating and cooling technologies, have the same type of electronics. A few years ago, we were part of Mayor's Advisory Council after Hurricane Sandy, and the big theme of that was resiliency. And we need gas, we need steam, we need electric, we need everything. So as we move away from those thoughts and go to more electric, that electric grid has to be much more resilient and much more sustainable than it is now. These buildings are going to have backup generation to provide minimum heat, so that the worst nightmare any of us would have is a 3-day blackout in the middle of winter. Right? So there's challenges there, and we need to partner with Con Ed. We need somebody to light the fire under Con Ed, because this is happening.
Loud enough. It's
Okay.
So, as we talk about that, and to ask the council and to ask them, our ownerships come to us as we're management companies, and they say to us, well, if we're going all electric, what is the city doing? As you talked about, power, we're gonna get wind turbines, we're gonna get other programs that you guys are implementing. But what is the timeline for the city? We have a great timeline for us, but what's the timeline for the city to say, yes, the wind turbines are going up in 10 years or XYZ? Because how can we go all electric if we don't turn around and say, well, I have nowhere else to go for power? So, and like you mentioned, the grids and everything else. I mean, we had a typical building recently that just lost power because, a vault exploded. So what are we doing on that side of it to push the companies?
Yes, so I mentioned, bringing in clean electrons. Offshore wind is set to come into the city as soon as 2024. So South Brooklyn Battery Terminal, there's various projects, especially in the South Brooklyn side. There's also a new pathway for upstate solar to come into the city, as well as hydroelectricity from Canada. So there's multiple paths of clean electricity as soon as 2024, and it's going to ramp up. And as I was saying before, the city has a goal to bring in 100% clean electricity by 2040. The state has a goal. So between the two, taking them for at their word, we'll all get there together, and it's happening in real time. So yeah, the timeline it's pretty much right in front of our faces.
Does anybody know why Germany is so dependent on natural gas from Russia? They turned off their nuclear power plants. And of course, we turned off our nuclear power plant, which was accounting for 1/3 of the power that was brought into the city. But I guess there's no going back there. No more questions? I'd like each of you to take a stab at the one major thing you would like the audience to remember.
I guess, pay attention if you're a building operator or a building owner. You have to run your properties as efficiently as possible. Lean on the building staffs that you have and the people that come out of programs like this with the training. They know how to operate buildings. They need to be given the tools. After that, don't ignore the buildings that aren't immediately threatened by fines in 2024 or even in 2030, because 2035 is coming right after that. And if you're not paying a fine now, you may be then. So, now's the time to get out ahead of the curve. A lot of this can be done, when you just look at your buildings and you inventory the equipment and you look at the service life of the equipment. Some of it's coming up soon anyway. So coincided with that and some, offsetting expenses, some of these jobs are not that painful to do and you would be doing them anyway. But, if you can get ahead of it a little bit, you're ahead of the game.
One of the things that stood out to me was about 5 years ago, I transitioned the building. I had a 2 million square foot building that was built in 1970. It ran on all steam. I had two 2,000-ton York chillers, and I had a 1,000-ton York chiller. So you run a big machine during the day, and you have your other machine that carries you on the weekend and at nights. All three of them were steam. We took the opportunity and converted the small machine to an electric drive. We were able to do that because of the size of the motor. People who did it, it was a great job, it's a great build, the machine runs efficiently and better than it ever did before. But now as I look at the two bigger machines, what would happen is I need high voltage from Con Edison. I'm not talking 277, 480, I'm talking like what I have at 1 Vanderbilt, right? So we need to have that ability in the street to run these big machines, these big motors. That power's not there. To get it to the street I need it on is quite an undertaking, and then you need to get it up to the plant. Also, as you take that steam machine and you convert it to electric, you've also reduced your efficiency by 20 to 25%. So you don't have a 2,000-ton machine anymore. Now you have two 175. So I took a 5,000-ton plant, and I'm losing efficiency right off the bat. I'm spending a lot of money to do it. We're still looking at it. We meet every year. We're trying to find better ways to get that power. I think if we have good, clean, high voltage, that's what it's going to take. In order to do that everywhere, it means revamping the whole grid. I don't know, you know what I mean, if that's what we're looking at. I tried to do it as one small example, and yes, it works on the small machines. Trying to get it to fly on a big machine is very, very difficult.
My major takeaway would be to look for, I know there's a lot of challenges that every building faces, but I don't think those are that unique, as unique as we might think. I think there are examples and case studies around the world, in the city, in other cities around the world that can help serve as a roadmap, provide guidance on how to overcome these challenges. Whether it's providing clean electricity or transitioning off of certain equipment. it all aligns with science-based targets, so my one main takeaway is to look to the leaders, to learn from their best practices, to think globally, act locally, act Local 94. And yeah, there's a lot of good information out there, so it's just a matter of collecting them and see how they can apply to your particular application.
Start now. Look at your buildings, look at what the future's coming. Look at how you think you can get there. Look at all the pieces of the puzzle and start a timeline, right? And think about repositioning whatever you can. Get your loads down. Get a control of what's happening in buildings. I think COVID showed us that a lot of buildings could be a lot more responsive to different changing conditions within buildings. We could improve the operating performance of buildings day one. Find all the O&Ms. Start building in the controllability and the discrete controllability at a floor by floor, at a space by space level as much as possible, right? There's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of stuff that can be done in existing buildings, right? New buildings you got a clean sheet of paper, think it through, you can do it. The key is figuring out how to get those existing buildings' energy consumption down, plan it out, figure out where your capital lies, and figure out how to move towards, as much as possible, that new electrified future. Because if we can get all the energy, right, or if we can get a zero emissions grid, it makes a lot of sense to try and leverage that to keep the emissions down locally in the city and to operate and get gas and oil out of buildings and steam if possible. I think the steam grid, you're right, they're working on it, right? They're working on a solution, but it's gonna be a little bit of everything to get us where we need to go, and we should start now, don't wait.
I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking the panel for a very candid discussion.
Thank you, and great job.
I think it's you. I think it's me. Definitely, I think it's me. Wow. Oh my God. I want to thank everybody for coming, and what we have in those boxes that we're giving you, that's actually a windmill. You have to put it together. And it's reminding you of what we're trying to do as far as the clean energy. Also, you have to plug it in. So we're also reminding you that we trying to electrify. Now, everybody's talking about Con Ed. You know they're here. I'm not gonna let you know who they are because we didn't ask them to comment on a panel or anything. So I'm not gonna let you know who they are. But Con Edison is here, so watch what you say about Con Ed.
Now you tell me. Your bridge just fine.
I thank everyone for coming. You guys made this a great event. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for supporting. And we're going to continue to do these kind of things in the future. Thank you. Wait a minute. One thing I forgot. I don't know if I mentioned Thomas Hart. Where's Tommy Hart? Did I mention you, Tommy Hart? I'm sorry. Tommy Hart helped out. Thank you.
Yes. Good to see you. Wonderful. How about you?